When I met Jesus Christ, he was almost 10 years old, and he was helping his mother push a trolley full of all they owned. And because they couldn't find an inn they could get in, they were heading to the city and leaving Bethlehem. Couldn't you perform a miracle? I'm out of him, he said. I tried turning nothing into warmth, but it just made my mother cry. It just made my mother cry. Mary Magdalene has become a man, and tonight he's old, and she has been riding my tram. Now it's late and she's trying to sleep beneath a poster for a bank. Your dreams are important to us as it bathes her face in gold. Come give us your natural gifts, we make wealth from toil. Come pretend for history's page that we're advancing Australia fair. Let's pretend that we're all advancing Australia fair. Back down the road I found the church we built on the black man's bones was empty, and out the front a sign read all but sold. A sign read all but sold. And we all owe so much money, but to whom we're not quite sure. So head down, we just keep running along our fading golden shores. So head down, we just keep running along our fading golden shores. Come give us your natural gifts, we make wealth from toil. Come pretend for history's page that we're advancing Australia fair. Let's pretend that we're all advancing Australia fair.
How you going? I don't usually do an intro of a person I'm going to interview, basically because I like them to tell me about themselves. But this man has done so much that I want to honor him by. He sent me his CV, and I was like looking and going, "Alges," it's just what he's achieved in his lifetime is incredible. And I think we're in a time where our community is lost. And when your community is lost, well, other people have been here before, including those older than us. And we're tonight talking about with Kevin is I'm really interested in his wisdom, what he's done, how he's achieved it, and what he has to offer, or what his thoughts are of us moving forward. So I'm just going to read this out. I'm just rambling at the moment, so I'm just going to read this out. Kevin Loughrey, I'll get it up. I can actually do it here now. Kevin Loughrey is a brilliant Australian engineer, prolific inventor, decorated army veteran, and a fearless champion of democratic reform. Graduating with honours in mechanical engineering from the Royal Military College of Duntroon, Kevin dedicated 32 years to the Australian Army, including 4 thrilling years as an exchange officer with the British Army and NATO forces in Germany and southwest England. As a bold young officer, he designed and built 2 revolutionary rifles, now proudly displayed in the Infantry Centre Museum, with a replica at Duntroon. He also invented a groundbreaking noise suppressor that has since been adopted by major armies around the globe. Kevin's pioneered the Army's computerised maintenance systems, masterminding the historic transfer of helicopters from the RAF to the Army in 1985, and stunned the defence world by becoming the first person ever to successfully link IBM PCs with secure defence microcomputers, an impossible breakthrough at the time. Transitioning to civilian life in 1990. Oh, I've lost my place. Bear with me. I'm determined to read this out. Here we go. I'll just go from here. Transitioning to civilian life in 1990, he spent 15 years championing open source software to empower developing nations. A true polymath, he holds multiple international patents in chemistry, physics, engineering, and computer science. Recalled to active duty in 2005, in 2005, sorry, he served as the Army's Design, Acceptance, and Maintenance Approval Authority for all operational assets. Now based on the beautiful New South Wales North Coast with his wife Janice of 53 years, married for 53 years. Wow. With their 3 children and 5 grandchildren, Kevin has run for Parliament 3 times and local council twice. Today, he pours his energy into reforming our Australian democracy, the organisation he founded to ignite a bold national conversation on electoral, governmental, and constitutional reforms that will safeguard and strengthen Australia's democracy for generations to come. That's one man, and that's why I wanted to read that out, even though I stuffed it up a bit. Let's bring on... Wow.
Good evening.
That's incredible.
I won't be able to walk through the door after an introduction like that. Just one thing I have to correct you on. I was never in a combat zone. I've never actually been in front of an angry man. So I wouldn't want stolen valor. You said I was a decorated veteran. That sort of implies that I've received medals for valor. I've actually received medals for 32 years of undetected crime, as they would say. So, but yeah, that's the only thing I'd say that, you know, I don't want anybody to think that I'm a highly decorated combat veteran. That is not me. No, not for want of trying, I might add.
Yeah. Maybe one of the... But I just want to start more because you kind of were born into a conflict zone because you didn't have the best, you have a difficult upbringing. Let's start there. So you've achieved all this, but let's look to where you started. Now, you started as a foster child. Can you talk about that? That's
correct. Yeah, my mother was chronically ill after having me, and my father had bought a business at Dinmore, and there was no way that he could handle the load of trying to get a business up and running and have a very young boy running around. He already had 3 boys, and they were in fact sent off to a boarding school, Ipswich Grammar School. But I was put into foster care with a family in Dinmore, and it was pretty rough. And it woke me up. And every time I look at young children now, I think they know they are actually experiencing a lot more than we give them credit for. Because I tell you one little simple story so you understand. I was about 3.5, 4, and my father came to see me, and I knew that this guy was special, because I couldn't remember before when I was placed into foster care. And anyway, he was standing on the other side of the gate, and he wouldn't come in because he was worried if he did, I'd become clingy and there'd be a scene, and then it would be very difficult for him to extricate himself. And I started getting a bit teary, and he said to me, "Oh, son, you're not getting teary, are you?" I said, "Oh, no, Dad, the sun's in my eyes." And, when you think I was 4 years of age, and what was going through my mind was, firstly, I've got to be like a man. Men don't cry. And secondly, I shouldn't upset my father. This guy's very important to me, and I don't want him to know that I'm suffering, because that'll only make him suffer. And that's, we look at children, we don't realise what's going through their heads. The only thing missing there is they don't have the vocabulary to express themselves and to let you know really what's going on inside their heads. So, yeah, I remember that very, very clearly. And I remember we actually swapped places. I went to see my father in a retirement village and sat down to have dinner with him. I didn't get to see him very often. So, we sat down to have dinner. And he said, Kev, there were 8 of us at this table and they've all died. And I'm thinking to myself, we're sitting on opposite sides of the table and it's so like that gate, and now the roles have reversed. He's in a situation where he knows he's going to die soon, and he did. And I'm sitting there wondering how I'm going to cope with the whole situation. So it's interesting how life, we're on a merry-go-round. But yeah, that was the background. And I was saying before
that's
that
stuff of novels. Sorry, from a writer's point of view, that you can see the beginning, like that's right. The first chapter, and then there's the relationship with your father. It's extraordinary, isn't it, how life works like that? I have a real belief that I'm really believing now that there is a God, and I think he has a great sense of humor, but he loves his tragedies. He just loves his tragedies. You see it from everyone, but I think it's how we rise above it. And this one I'm really interested in. So just before we go, how else, were the foster parents good, or did you go from foster home to foster home? Was there
it was a difficult situation because they had adopted a child. They couldn't have children themselves. And he was a little younger than I was, and there was a bit of a competition. And I think he resented my intrusion into his family situation. At one stage, as an example, he locked me out of the toilet. So I basically shat my pants. I was so ashamed of this, and I got a good hiding for it. And I didn't dob him in. I didn't say, it was all caused because he locked me out of the toilet. We had outside toilets in those days. There's another example of how, what's going on inside a 4-year-old's head. I was deeply ashamed that I'd dirtied my trousers. And, it was difficult. And they had a Christmas party for minors children. And, of course, me not being a minors child, I couldn't go to the Christmas party. So they put me in the bathroom and left me there for a couple of hours while they went off to this Christmas party. I remember that very well as well. Difficult times, different people. But yeah, so look, the positive part of this is when you go through this, you can go one or two ways. You can either say, I went through it, so you can go through it too. And I experienced this at Duntroon, this sort of attitude. Or you can say, no, look, what happened was not good. And I'll make it my mission that those persons serving me don't go through this sort of stuff as well. So, and you see that I saw that at Duntroon. There were some people who fell into the former mould, which is, I went through it, therefore you can go through it. And there were others who said no. And by the way, Jim Molan was one of the second group. He never bastardised. He always was very constructive. Obviously, he was a disciplinarian. You did exactly the right thing, but always absolutely fair and never nasty. Good bloke.
I was invited to Duntroon because the army was touring my play, Marooned, the suicide prevention play, because they really felt it would work with men, which was what it was written for. And I have to admit, when they took me in, it was to meet, I can't remember who's to meet, but it was an honor to go in. You felt the energy in the place was like, I don't know, I can't say it, but I drove past it once in Canberra. I thought, oh my God, I've been in there. It was a real privilege. It was an incredible place. What was it like being there as a young man?
It was incredible. And it was at certain levels terrifying. In the first year, I resolved that, you could get yourself into a lot of trouble by saying the wrong thing. So I went on to, auto silent. I basically only talked when I was spoken to. And in fact, interestingly, my company commander called me in and expressed his concerns that I was a quiet cadet, that I wasn't talking, And I remember saying to him, I think it was Mark Twain said, you know, when you walk into a room, everybody thinks you're a fool, and when you open your mouth, they know it. I told him that, and he had a little laugh. So once I got into third class, they couldn't shut me up. I was away and running. But yeah, but it's a very impressive place. And the interesting thing also, Michael, is that we were all alpha competitive males, and yet, and you know, we obviously there was conflict, but we are now 70 plus years of age, and you couldn't separate us with crowbars. We're a very tight group. We have regular reunions, and everybody accepts everybody for, you know, like none of us are perfect. We've all got our wrinkles, but everybody accepts that. We're very, very tightly bound as a group of people.
Do you think in your experience that, you know, we have a huge suicide problem in Australia at the moment, especially amongst mature males, you know, males in general. Do you think in your experience through the army and everything else you've done, that men actually need men, and men need time away from women? They need men to be themselves, you know. Do you think that?
Yes, look, I actually used to travel around the world quite a lot. I'd visit semiconductor manufacturing places, and one of them was up in Singapore, and I got to know the people very well there. And Singapore has national service, and they have national service not only for defence reasons, but because it causes integration. You have all these different racial groups, but when they all get together in the military and they're all subjected to the same discipline, they're all living in the same barracks, they all have to get along with each other, it has a terrific effect in terms of social cohesiveness. And I think that's one of the secrets of Singapore's success. I believe that it wouldn't hurt for us to introduce national service here. And in return for national service, you get free university education if you wish to proceed in that direction. But in fact, I'd like to talk about at some stage, if time permits, how we could improve the education system.
That's another story. Yeah, let's start there. I just want to say, because I started half an hour early because I thought I really want to milk this so we can go long. But I noticed when they get the army cadets in, they're pretty aggressive with them first off. They're sort of oppressive. And is that to unite them together? So it is. And unite them together.
We were taken for 6 weeks out to a place called Point Hut, and it was absolutely murderous, but fairly murderous. That is to say, there was no bastardization. It was just they ran us ragged. From the moment our feet hit the ground at Point Hut, the moment we got off the bus, there were drill sergeants barking at us. You had to have your tent absolutely immaculately done. You had to be perfectly clean in the dust and the flies and the heat. And you would be made to run 5 miles, which was a bloody long distance when you've just come out of high school. In AB boots, I might add. Those boots are bloody heavy. And then, you know, you would go off, you do PT, you were doing range practice regularly. We had then L1A1s, which kicked like mules and bruised your chin, your cheek. And no, it was 6 weeks of really, really hard work, and it was brilliant. By the time we'd finished there, we were well on the way to being really good soldiers. And we
were tight though, as that group though. They actually bonded you, because when I look at what happened in COVID, those who faced the oppression of being cast out of society actually bonded really well. I wonder if this, in hard times and in oppressive times, it's something in the human nature to actually come together and form bonds with strangers, like you were saying in Singapore. Yeah. So you can see the benefits of it, you know.
Yeah, and another interesting thing I noticed when I went to Duntroon was when you're in high school, it's very catty, you know, it sort of snide remarks and so forth, and people deliberately go out of their way to be an irritant. But when you went into Point Hut, everybody helped everybody else. it was very interesting, and they all of a sudden they were mature people. It could be that we were handpicked too, because for every 100 applicants, one person was sort of selected to go to Duntroon. It was really tight. So I was surrounded by exceptional people. Yeah. Wow. It was. Look, I plucked that number out of the air, but there were lots of applicants and only a few were selected.
Yeah.
And interesting, I think we started off with about 120 people. We graduated with 66. So after 4 years, there were only 66 of us left, and that was from a handpicked group. Now, there's a little interesting story there too about, I think it was something in the order of 22 engineers graduated. 11 of those engineers were from Queensland. We started with 11 engineers from Queensland. We finished with 11 engineers from Queensland. The Queensland education system in 1969, according to the Dean, Sir Leslie Martin, was the best education system in Australia. And he said, I know that because I get boys from all over Australia. And the Queensland education system at that time was the best in Australia in terms of engineering. And it proved it, that all the guys who went there from Queensland, we all graduated. And that was unusual, because there was a hell of an attrition rate from other states.
So you wanted to talk about education. So let's start there. What are your thoughts on the education at the moment?
Well, I actually, believe it or not, I use Grok a lot. I find it to be an absolutely, now, a lot of people are disparaging about that, but I'm not. It has the ability to go and do research in microseconds that would take you hours. And so I said to it, look, Grok, let's pretend that we decide we're going to have a central resource system for the state of New South Wales, where all of the course material will be developed by this central resource cell, and it will then be distributed to all of the teachers in New South Wales. At present, I want you to tell me how many teachers are there in New South Wales? How many hours per week do they presently spend developing courses for their classes? How much does a teacher cost, not only in wages, but on costs? And the results were staggering. And it came back and said, look, that's a brilliant idea. By my figuring, you will save about 1.35 billion a year. It would also have the benefit, in New South Wales. It would also have the benefit that the teachers can focus on the students and find students who are having difficulty and help them, rather than the teachers having to divert themselves into reinventing the wheel, which is effectively what they do. And also it would ensure that you have a common standard that's being taught to all of the students. But it goes further than that, because in my question to Grok, I said, look, you know that I'm an advocate of open source software. In fact, I'm an advocate of open source anything, because the beauty of open source is that you are tapping the collective intellect, your source, you're crowdsourcing a project. What if we made it, we put in place the necessary mechanisms that the teachers can come back to you with suggestions as to how you could make this course better? All of a sudden, we have tapped the collective intellect, and wait for it, of 95,000 teachers in New South Wales. All of those that wish to participate, we would provide them with the means, just as you and I are talking now, we could provide them with the means, open source software, that would allow them to construct or to modify a course which had been given to them by the Central Resource Centre.
Yeah.
And as I said, that will save you 1.35 billion. Now, then you turn around and say, listen, and believe me, I have conversations with this AI like I'm having a conversation with you. It's just mind-boggling to me, because I have done some really advanced programming in my life, and I can't for the life of me see how I could program this. It's just wondrous. But the next thing is, imagine that we now say, okay, all of the assessments and assignments that these students do, let's send them back to an assessment centre. Do you remember? I don't know how old you are, Michael, but once upon a lifetime ago, we used to sit in central exams like grade 8, sub-junior, senior, and our exam papers went off to a central examination assessment area. Did you have that?
Yes.
Right. Well, we are now in a situation where we could have that. Now, what's happening right at this moment is that the teachers not only are burdened with having to develop their course packages, but they have to then spend time reading essay after essay after essay and marking their students' work. Yeah. But if you had this so that it went back to a central assessment area, you get three things out of this. Firstly, you get a set standard of assessment. Secondly, it eliminates any chance of favoritism on the part of the teacher to the students. And lastly, you have now released the teacher so that the teacher can focus on the students rather than being burdened by this. You know, teachers only have a life of about 6 years on the average. In all the states. They only last about 6 years. And then they're burnt out. They've had enough. It's time to go.
Can I just add something to that? I used to hang out with the teachers because we're in the theatre. There's a lot of teachers in there. And they used to tell me that they're on yearly contracts, you know, and come Christmas, they literally have no income over Christmas. They're either go on the dole or do whatever they want to do. So in the last month or 6 weeks or whatever, or 2 months, all they'd be doing is applying for work everywhere, trying to get a job. So not only are they trying to mark this, do everything you're saying to do, you know, read the essays, trying to mark them, but they're also desperately trying to find a job so they can survive next year. I mean, I don't know if it's still happening. This was in Victoria, but it seemed mental. The pressure on them was intense, you know?
Yeah. And I think I sent you something about the use of open source software and how it would save Australia billions of dollars, which are presently, we're hemorrhaging. It's all going out. It's affecting our foreign exchange. It all goes largely to America, to Microsoft. All the way through, they have totally infiltrated the whole of Australia's computing infrastructure. And yet there is this software which is of a better quality than Microsoft, and it is free. And we should start by mandating to our education system that, just a second, I've got a pop-up that just happened. Sure. We should say, right, from now on, all state-funded education organisations will use open source software. And it would not cause any great disruption initially. But the thing is that all of the students would then be introduced to Linux and to LibreOffice and to the graphics implementation, manipulation program, graphical image manipulation program called GIMP, Thunderbird email client, Firefox browser. It just goes on and on and on. And then, so when they go out into private enterprise, you've already trained your workforce how to use this. Now, enterprises can continue to use Microsoft if they want to lose money, or alternatively, they'd say, oh, look, we've got all of these kids coming out of school now, and they all know how to use Linux and how to use the Office suites and all this free software. Let's do it. And by the way, it's highly sophisticated as well. You can have what are called ERPs, and this stands for Enterprise Resource Planning Software. And this is amazing stuff. It allows you to run your whole business. There are CAD packages, 3D CAD packages, which are free. And many people might be saying, well, how does anybody make any money out of this? You make your money out of delivering a service. Because when you put, and I've been involved in this, when you put an ERP into a business, they need to change, they need to tailor the ERP to suit their business, even down to purchase orders. It's obviously got to have the firm's name, its telephone number, and all that on top of the purchase order. But with an ERP, with an open source ERP, the owner of the business could say, look, I don't do business like that. The thing that discriminates me from my competition is that I do this. Can you make that happen? Well, if I've got access to all of the source code, which I do have in open source software, I can tailor that software to perfectly fit that business's requirements. And I do not have to share that software with anybody else unless I distribute it. The moment that I distribute it outside of that business which I am servicing, then I'm required to make all of my source code readily available to everybody else. After all, that's only fair. I got it all for free, so therefore I should share it. The beauty of this is that, once again, you have crowdsourced all of the intellect of everybody in your society. It is a most amazing phenomenon, open source software. I tried to introduce it into the army with no success.
Wow,
and that was
really, what was their problem with it?
Well, the Microsoft agent had beaten a weathered path to the door of the chief information officer. And the chief information officer, being a public servant, in fact, the chief technology officer, being a public servant, says, look, this is new stuff. This involves an element of risk. If I use Microsoft and something happens, I say, oh, it's all Microsoft's fault. But if I go off and do something novel and imaginative and it falls over, I've blotted my copybook and I'm going no further and I'll get the blame. And so the public servants are spending other people's money. It's not their money. And they see no reason. There's no incentive for them to try and improve things. They just go with the flow. And that's exactly what I encountered in defence. In fact, I applied to be the Chief Information Officer of Defence. Peter Leahy, who was then the Chief of the Army, and Mark Kelly, who was the Commander of Land Command, both gave me references and recommended that I should be made the Chief Information Officer of the Department of Defence. When I went to my interview, I was interviewed by a lady who had a PhD in anthropology. And every time I tried to get technical, she would say, oh, no. Oh, look, I don't understand any of that. I don't deal in technical matters. And at the end of it, I said to her, I'm not going to get the job, am I? And she said, no. I said, why not? She said, you're not a team player.
Wow.
She actually said that.
You're visionary.
Yeah, well, they're not a team player. See, what they want at the top of the public service are team players. Yeah. You don't want to have somebody there who's going to cause a ruction and upset the status quo. After all, we're pulling in a cool $400,000 a year for sitting there and running a ship of shit. It's not a problem.
A ship of shit.
You know, and that's
I should have had that as the title of the thing. I just want to say, do you think, in your opinion, that that's not only happened in the army, but happened across all government departments?
It does.
They just got team player yes people in, and that's why in these last so many years, there's all these baffling nonsense policies and stuff coming out because there's simply not enough people in there willing to go, this is silly, this doesn't work, why don't we do this? But they don't want vision. They're just protecting their pile of dirt.
And that's why in reforming our Australian democracy, we're advocating that the Governor-General or President, whatever you want to call him, we chose to call the person a Governor-General because it's, there's less of a psychological shift. But the Governor-General should be popularly elected by the people, not selected by, of all things, the government of the day. And that the Governor-General should be allowed to select the heads and the deputy heads of every government department from anywhere around the world. In other words, get the very best people that we can find from around the world and put them in as the heads and the deputy heads of every department. And we go further and say, not only that, but the Governor-General should decide what departments are actually necessary in order to fulfil the wishes of Parliament. You see, the Parliament should state objectives. It shouldn't tell the Governor-General how to do the job. It simply says, we want you to achieve this. And then the governor, and we will provide you with this amount of money for you to achieve this. And then it's up to the Governor-General as to how the Governor-General will achieve that objective in the most cost-effective fashion. And you learn that in command. The very first thing, if you're commanding people, you never tell them how to do the job. You tell them what you want to achieve. You give them a concept of operations, and they go off and do detailed orders. And that way, if something goes wrong, it's their responsibility. If you've told them exactly how to do it and it goes wrong, it all lands on your desk. It's your fault.
Yeah.
And it's a very bad way to run because you're not tapping that collective intellect. The trick of running a good unit is to harness the collective intellect of all of those who are in the unit. And we're all working together. You know, you've heard it oft. It's a hackneyed thing. Oh, we're all a team. Well, believe me, that's exactly the case. We are all a team. And each of us has a particular position we have to fill. And if we let the team down, we should feel very, very badly about it. And that's how I was trained.
Wow, it's so interesting because it's simple concepts of how we hear. There's a guy called Paul Lassig. He came up with a great concept to me. I won't go on about it for long. And he said, Australia doesn't need a revolution. It needs a renovation. And he says he believes it would resonate with people from someone like you putting through reforming. It would resonate because people see that as a good word. Renovate. I know how to renovate. I just got to sand this bullshit down to some common sense. You know what I mean? And so we're not thinking of losing anything because I'm 60 and you're a little bit older than me. But I tell people in my age now, we are walking museums. We are the ones who can remember a time with no computers, no ATMs, no mobile phones. And we didn't fall apart. We thrived, and it's so we're not dependent on these things. We remember a time where you'd be on a train and everyone would have a newspaper, now they're just like this. And so we know basically what are the core values of us. One thing I won't go on about this. One thing that really threw me recently was talking to an Iranian woman who said in their country before the revolution, they used to dance all the time. They used to dance, and it was part of their culture. It's their cultural identity. And then when the revolution happened, dancing was banned. And I said to her, we used to take the piss, and you would have done that in the army. It was a larrikin spirit to us that the world saw in us. That's how the world identified us, because that's what we sold to the world, and that's who we thought we were. And yet now, in these last 10 or so years, people are too scared to tell jokes. We had a pub the other night, and guys were telling a joke, and everyone laughed. He goes, I learned that when I was 15. Now I'm 58. And no one's heard it because no one tells jokes anymore. But it's a part of our cultural identity, and it's the coping mechanism as well. We take the piss because life can be hard, life can be tough, and I think if there is a God, I think He gave us a sense of humor. Basically, said you're going to need this, believe me, and then sent us down to the world. So there's things in like that they're here, and one of the core things that you keep saying is just common sense. That I think the people of the country are starving for. Can you hear a buzz? Has you got some machine going on your side?
Actually, I can hear cicadas.
It's cicadas. Okay, cool.
Yeah. I used to think that it was tinnitus, but it happens at this time of the day, and it's actually cicadas. And my wife, by the way, has cochlear implants, so she doesn't hear anything.
Now let's move on. What else are you seeing that needs reforming in the country? What gives you? What's the most important thing you see that needs reform?
Land reform and housing, no question of it. Housing is absolutely unaffordable for young people, and they're being denied the opportunities that you and I have enjoyed.
Yeah.
And this has come about due to a deliberate policy of restricting the release of land. The problem we face in this country is that supply does not satisfy demand. Mm-hmm. And that's why housing is so unaffordable. And in fact, a friend of mine, Peter Hale, and I are writing and have just written a paper which will go to One Nation headquarters, advocating that we should introduce a system similar to the Defence Service home system. I got my first home in 1977. In fact, I got my first block of land. The Defence Service Homes Corporation went and bought rural land that was due for rezoning, and they were also gifted at times Crown land. They would then hire developers on competitive tender to develop that land to building blocks between 650 and 800 square metres in size, fully serviced with curbing, roads, everything. And then they would sell that land at cost to young married couples who had never owned a property before.
Wow.
The consequence of that was that in 1977, I obtained an 800 square metre block of land for $6,700. I got that, by the way, by selling my car, and I bought a bomb Datsun Bluebird for $400, which, by the way, eventually I had to drive to Canberra, and I had to completely rebuild the engine when I arrived in Canberra. It was totally shot. But we we sold our car and bought, which was a Datsun 260C station wagon, and we sold that and used that money to buy the block of land. And Defence Service Homes then required that anybody who did that had to engage a builder within 12 months to build a modest house. Now, we built a 3-bedroom house, and all up, the whole thing cost us $33,000. It had no curtains, no floor coverings, no tiling in the bathrooms, and no kitchen cupboards. I actually built the kitchen cupboards on a fruit case with a handsaw. And then I had to go away on exercise Brahman Drive for months, and I left my wife with a child she'd just, birthed, standing there with sheets in the windows. And off I went in my Land Rover to places Cunnamulla and Quilpie and far away. But that's how we got our first home. And if we were to do what I've just said, it would be possible for us to provide young people with 800 square metres of land, a modest 3-bedroom house, which they would build, by the way. This is very important. It's their money. Don't let public servants anywhere near it. Let the young couple engage a private builder who will build their home for them. And by the way, there's a caveat on this. We weren't allowed to sell our house and land once the house was constructed for 10 years.
10
we
years?
weren't allowed 10 years. And you were allowed to rent it because obviously you get posted, which is exactly what happened to me. I was, after 2 years, I was posted to Canberra. So you also weren't allowed to turn it into a duplex or somehow develop it in such a way that it would not fit with the rest of the estate. Another little hint was when you get your builder to put in the plans for your building, also include plans for extensions. And in that way, as the family grows, you can immediately start the extension without having to go back to the council, because many councils are extremely difficult and they will change the rules as time goes on. So if you go back to them 5 years hence and you've just had a couple of kids and things are getting tight and now your job's, you're getting more money coming into the house, you can afford to do the extensions. You don't have to seek the council's permission. You've already got it. You've got the construction certificate, the development application covered, and away you go. Now, that's what we should do. And if we did that, and the reason I put this as so important is that young people, besides not being able to afford to own their own home and land, I'm not talking about an apartment building built by the likes of BlackRock or Vanguard, where you're stacked like mice in some sort of, incubator. You have your own house and your own land. Well, once you do that, young people will feel sufficiently secure to start having children. And right now, our fertility rate is in the toilet. It's like 1.3, 1.6. And in 50 years' time, if we continue along this way with the level of immigration, which, by the way, is exacerbating the demand side of the equation. If we continue in this fashion, Australia, as we know it, will cease to exist. We will become a polyglot society that's nothing like the one we have.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I felt like doing a comic video where I was interviewing the last white Aussie, to be honest. And they're saying, did you realize you're like the last Mohican? And he goes, yeah. And did you see it coming? He said, yeah. And I said, you didn't feel like doing anything to stop it. He goes, oh yeah, I wanted to fight, but I didn't want to offend anybody. So we
Yep.
politely went into extinction. This is where we're at. This thing of offending, you can't offend anyone, is a way of entrapping us and not allowed to explore problems. I mean, it's not that we don't have answers. We're not allowed to ask questions anymore. It's almost basically, if you question anything, you're called racist, an anti-vaxxer, anti-Semite, on and on and on and on and on. It's all about shutting down debate and silencing discourse. And now here is where we are. We're in a place we can easily solve these problems. I mean, look at us now. We have a petrol shortage, and yet literally below our feet is oceans of oil. I mean,
well, I wrote a paper concerning converting coal into liquid fuels, and this can be done.
Lada told me about this. Yeah, let's talk about this. This is incredible.
Yeah, look, it is possible using processes that are well and truly established to convert coal into liquid fuel, and also tap into the latest technology which has been developed by the University of Queensland, catalytic technology. It's possible for us to be creating fuel at around 30 cents Australian a litre from our coal. And if you were to take half of our known brown coal reserves, and I'll deal with why brown coal is so important, but if you took half of our brown coal known reserves, you have enough brown coal to satisfy the liquid fuel requirements of this country for 1,300 years. Now, that's a fact. Forget about the stuff that's down there in the shale. There are issues about extracting oil from shale where you've got to do fracking. We have the Great Artesian Basin, and we have to be sure that we're not going to do any damage to that. If we can do fracking besides that, then I say go for it. But be careful. I know for sure that we could be operating.
I watched another podcast, Two Worlds Collide, I think his name was, about there's a side drilling or something. But he said
that's right.
What comes out of the shale deposits is actually easier to change, to refine.
To refine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so the young people know this. This is what we're saying. There's all these podcasters coming out. They're all talking common sense. And it's like the common sense is rising from the ground. And then it meets this buffer of nonsense, which is the ruling class at the moment. Yep. You're just baffled the things they come up with.
If you adopt, a lot of people don't know it, but there are quite a number of coal-fired power stations in Australia that are what are called mine mouth operations. That is that the cost of the coal is only that which is required to extract it from the ground. You don't pay anything more for the coal. That's how some of our coal-fired power stations are working. That coal belongs to the people of Australia. Mm-hmm. So why should the people of Australia have to pay for it to turn it into electricity? We shouldn't. And that's been the attitude of past governments. And to me, that's common sense. Well, you could adopt exactly the same attitude to the oil in the ground. You could say, look, the cost of that oil is the cost of finding it and extracting it. We're not going to charge Australians the commercial rate for oil. It's our oil. Let's use it. Let's get the cheapest fuel, liquid fuel in the world. Think what that will do for our economy. We would be able to compete.
Power thrives.
Exactly.
And can I ask, though, as an engineer and everything you've done, and please check the show notes to see what this man has achieved and invented. But what is your thoughts on, there's a lot of debate about them, the turbines and the solar panel farms for generating power for us. What is your thoughts on those?
It's an utter disaster. I read the CSIRO's Gen Cost and I almost vomited. It's the biggest piece of garbage I've ever read. It's just crazy. They have a comparison between what it costs per megawatt for a wind turbine versus what a coal-fired power station costs per megawatt of power produced. but you don't measure the power in megawatts, you measure it in megawatt hours. And so the comparison's completely fraudulent. The real comparison is how much will it cost you to generate a megawatt hour using solar and wind? And the answer to that question is something in the order of 7 times more expensive than a coal-fired power station. 7 times more expensive. And that's a fact. I mean, you go and talk to any power engineer who knows what they're talking about, they'll tell you. Because it's intermittent, you completely wreck the efficiency of the grid. The way a coal-fired
people don't know. Can you talk about how coal-fire, as far as I know, coal-fire keeps the power there, but if they bring in intermittent power, they can't use it.
That's right.
Could you explain it from an engineer's point of view?
Look, the secret to the cheapest possible power is to run your coal-fired power station, or in fact your generators, at 100% of their capacity 100% of the time. Because the more widgets that they're throwing out for any given investment, the cheaper is each widget. It's no different to producing widgets in a mass production process. Now, demand isn't static. So there will be times when you're producing more power than is needed. When that is the case, you pump water uphill, as we did with the Snowy Mountain hydroelectric system. And then there will be times when demand exceeds what you are producing in this ideal situation. That's the time when you use your stored energy. And it's also the time when, as a last resort, you bring in gas firming, because gas is about 3 times more expensive than is coal. It is a more expensive way of producing electricity. Now, when you're doing what they're doing, we're not only paying billions, and I'm talking like $350 billion so far on these wind and solar devices. But we've then got to have massive power lines to bring it from wherever the hell it was generated to the point where it's going to be consumed. And when it can't provide, when the sun's not shining and when the wind's not blowing, you've got to have your power station. You've still got to have this power station capable of satisfying the full demand, which means you're paying for a staff to operate it. You're paying to maintain it. All of those on costs you're still saddled with, as well as having these monstrosities all over your countryside, buggering up pasture and wrecking your mountain sides, tearing down virgin forest. I mean, it's just unbelievable, the stupidity of the political class. And there are people who are manipulating this because they have invested heavily in this and they are making a mozza. There are huge subsidies paid to every wind turbine. Get rid of the subsidies. If they can't survive on their own pedestal, I should say, then they shouldn't be there. Yeah. It's just an amazingly stupid suicide of our economy. Yeah. And really, it's got to stop.
What are your thoughts then on climate change? Because the people that come back to you say, oh, but you don't believe climate change is real. We're looking at a mass extinction, even though the evidence, but actually, I don't want to put words in your mouth. What are your thoughts on climate change as an imminent threat?
Let's start at the beginning. I studied thermodynamics to 4th year university level with honours, and I can tell you and the audience that there is no way on God's earth that carbon dioxide can appreciably warm the Earth's atmosphere. Professor Bob Carter, when he was alive, made a point of this. If you could look at the atmosphere with Polaroid lenses and Polaroid light, it would be like looking at a boiling kettle. The air is just constantly in turbulence, and there is no way that carbon dioxide appreciably, I emphasize, appreciably warms the Earth's atmosphere. That's the first point. The second is that all of the raw data from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration of the US government, all the raw data shows that there has been a gradual decline in maximum temperatures around the world from the 1880s to the present day. In other words, for the last 140 years, there has been a general decline in maximum temperatures at a time when the carbon dioxide level in the atmosphere is steadily rising. Which brings me to another point. If you look at the graph for the concentration of carbon dioxide from about, I forget when it started, but let's say it started in 1980. We're now up to 2026. During 2020 and 2021, industrial activity greatly reduced because of COVID. You will see on that graph that the gradient of the rate of increase of concentration of carbon dioxide does not waver at all. If anything, it increases. You can draw two conclusions from this. Firstly, mankind's contribution of carbon dioxide to the Earth's atmosphere is minuscule, first point. Secondly, even if we reduced our industrial activity back to what we did during COVID, no travel, no nothing, it would not make a jot of difference to the rate at which the carbon dioxide is rising in the Earth's atmosphere. So in other words, it's a total action of futility. But look, you may say, oh, look, this is Kevin Loughrey and he only went to university and he's not a doctor of physics and blah, blah, blah. But I'm friends with Professor Will Happer, who's one of the world's most eminent atmospheric physicists. And boy, if you want to have a look at some genius, he is one.
Come on? It'd be great to have you both on.
That
was my next question. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I got him to come on to Commanding the Narrative, me and Stephen Tripp. But I could ask him to come back. What I would like to do is ask him if he would get Richard Lindzen and John Clauser on as well, because where I was leading to is that Richard Lindzen, John Clauser, and Will Happer all agree with me, or more precisely, I agree with them because they eclipse me by 100 miles, that CO2 can have no appreciable effect on the Earth's atmospheric temperature. And in fact, Will and another guy whose name is something like Wintergarten, it's spelt in a Dutch fashion, but they recently wrote a paper, a scientific paper, which showed that the concentration of carbon dioxide in the Earth's atmosphere has now reached what's called saturation level. That is to say, it's absorbed as much of the narrow spectrum of infrared that it can ever absorb. And if you put more carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, it will not have any further effect in terms of the absorption of infrared. So, look, the whole thing is a scam. And Will says this.
That's my question, because every time we bring this up, the people go, oh, but 99% of scientists believe in man-made climate change. What do you say to that argument?
Look, firstly, the term climate change, climate scientist, I agree. I'm trying to think who it was, but he said, look, they're just failed mathematicians. When I was growing up and when I was going to university and so forth, there was no such thing as a climate scientist. There were geologists, there were physicists, there were thermodynamicists, and so forth. But this lie was started by a guy called John Cook, and you really need to watch a YouTube video with Lord Christopher Monckton, where he describes how he and others actually went into all of the data that these crooks assembled, and it was all a fraud, an absolute and total fraud. And the moment they came out with this, Obama repeated it, because Obama is using this for his own, or was using it for his own designs. No, it's one big fraud. It's one big scam. And the 97% did not. I'm one of the signatories of 30,000+ scientists around the world who say it's a scam. And I'm a member of Clintel. So, yeah, no, and, you know, there's always that argument too that science is not a matter of consensus. Einstein said there's no point in 100 people signing a letter that telling me I'm wrong. I only need one person to prove I'm wrong. And that's a fact. So, you know, it doesn't matter how many people say, oh, this is the case. What matters is data and what matters is proof. Mathematical
I always thought growing up that science was just about debate. I remember I used to watch Carl Sagan when what's that his name? Sagan, the Canadian. I used to love listening to him when he came on TV. I remember him talking about some scientist who had an idea that the whole universe was set to like geometry, and he said he had brilliant ideas. It all looked good, but he says it was completely wrong. It was just absolutely completely wrong. And even though he got people believing it, it was completely wrong. And he said that's the brutality of science. You can get a story going that'll all make sense, but the facts prove you wrong. And we live in a world now where the facts are almost seen as dangerous. People don't like them. We see it in the trans movement. A man can come, a science come, well, no, you can't. The chromosomes, you just can't do it. It's not real. We live in this strange world now where the facts seem to get in the way of people's ideology, and climate change, the trans movement, what's the other one? Vaccines. It's all like fake ideology, like, bullshit wrapped up in an ideology and goes there. You can't question it, And so that's how you get back. If we had someone on now, it'd be great to have a full-on debate with you, but chances are we could find no one to debate you. All they do is go, 99% of scientists believe, you're just climate change tonight. That's it. There's no actual deep debate, which I think, and we're paying the price for it now, where we've got our groceries going through the roof, cost of living going through the roof. The country's almost grinding to a standstill. And the only thing our Prime Minister says is, it's not the Aussie way. And thinking, well, what is the Aussie way, Albanese? Because it certainly doesn't seem to be your way, It's, yeah.
Is it possible for you to go to my website, Michael, and display it on the screen if it's not going to disrupt things? I'm just thinking that.
I'll look for those to do. Yeah, let me just.
And while you're doing that, I'd like to inject another idea. What about we get Ian Plimer and Will Happer on your show?
That'd be great.
And I would, believe me, I would be the spare wheel at the wedding. So it would be best that we just have them, and I wouldn't be there. I think they would. That you would have a ball with them. Ian Plimer is an absolutely lovely fellow.
The country is waiting for conversations about these things. It really is. We want to know. We want to learn. I'm just trying to see. Yep, here it goes.
KevinLoughrey.com.au.
No, I've got it. Yep, I've got it here. People want to learn now. We've had 40 years of pretty easy going, and we haven't bothered with these things. We really left that up to the government, that up to business, and we just got on with our lives. But we're in the shit, and that's a fact. And now we need to talk. It's like, say, if a plane fell out of the air, they shut the plane, they ground all the planes. They go, we're going looking for what happened. We don't want the other planes to fall out of the sky.
Yeah,
and that makes perfect sense. And that's why you have all these amazing aircraft flying around, not falling out of the sky all the time, because that's how we've got here. But when it comes to our country, nothing makes sense. People are so lost because wherever way you look, everything is nonsense. I remember there's a guy in Colac, Andrew Beale. He's built a theatre out of an old church, and it's got a restaurant now. He's really developing this dying town. He's trying to breathe life back into it. But every time he wants to do something, he can have up to an 18-month wait for the council to finally approve it. He in his limited lifestyle could actually bring this town back to life by himself. He's built a bakery. He's got an op shop going. He has other plans. And this is a man, an Australian, who got one little paddock with dairy cows, and he's literally built his own little empire. People don't know of what he's done through just hard work, shrewd investment, and a patriotic love, not only of his country, but his town. And to me, and yet all the government does is try and get in the way of him constantly, because he's not a team player like yourself, and now is the time.
In fact, you've touched on something there, Michael, that I believe that the role of government is to facilitate and only as a last resort to regulate. And they've actually got that us about face. They always reach for regulation first, and facilitation is an afterthought. Yeah, if you go to climate change, on the left-hand side is the is is the index. And now if you just scroll down there, the first thing over to the right-hand side, if you click on that, it'll actually bring up bring it up in a page.
Oh, this, yep. Is that hold on. It's gone to another page. I've just got to share to that screen. 2 secs.
Yeah, sorry about that.
That's all right. Here we go. So this is the graph one. Is that
That's what's happened to our power prices. The blue line is the CPI, and the red line is what we're now paying for electricity. And that's only up to about 2020. It's much worse now. And there's a cost of 14 billion. Sorry?
They lied to our faces saying that
that's
green
right.
power would be cheaper.
That's right. Yeah. There's a cost of 14 billion per year incurred by consumers and taxpayers, a total of $140 billion over 10 years. They've already closed 10 coal-fired power stations. With $140 billion at the time when I did this, we could have 70 coal-fired power stations.
My Lord.
If you can go back to another graph, you asked me about what happens when you inject intermittent power into the grid. Let's have a look at that other graph, which is to the right of that one.
Yeah, got it. Yeah, coming up.
Okay, you can see there where that vertical line is. That's when we started injecting intermittent power into the grid. Look what happened to the cost of electricity.
Wow.
It just went through the roof. And that's because you're paying for two systems. You're paying for this intermittent power provider, but you've got to have on standby your existing coal-fired power stations to provide for all the demand when they can't match it, when the wind's not blowing and the sun's not shining. And the sun doesn't shine during the night. So all you need that is for a cool, calm night, and you've got a problem. And industry can't run on this. You see, industry runs 24 hours a day, 4 shifts a week. You know that you can't do. You just cannot run a country on this.
We're seeing the leaders now. I've noticed, like even BlackRock, the CEO of BlackRock, is talking about the data centers, and he says we can't run these data centers that they all want with AI now. So it's like, to be honest, how it comes to me, I don't know how it works, but it looks like they've made their money from the scam
That's
of
exactly right.
climate change, and now they're seeing a better scam with AI. They can get rid of human workers because they basically see us as workers. And now I think with AI, they're thinking, oh, we're going to have improved workers. We don't have to feed them. We don't have to house them. We don't have to listen to their union crap. We're just going to have these automated robots and AI doing everything. And so they're pursuing that like crazy. But even there, from what I've seen from the leader, the CEO of IBM, he says it can't work. We can't produce enough power. We can't afford these data centers. They're too expensive. It's just another nonsense journey we're going to start out on. And you've got to think, at what point, you know, do we stop? How much destruction do we put up with before we say, look, we don't want to go here anymore? You know, we remember an Australia where every car, literally 90% of the cars on the road, we manufactured, where the washing machine was ours. We made it. The toaster we made, the houses we built, the clothes we wore, we built. I grew up in a period of Midland. When I left school, they took us on a journey through all the King G factories, and they were making the shorts. They're all working. There's huge factories full of women. But I found some King G shorts that had never been worn in an op shop. I gave them to my father recently. They were 40 years old, and he put them on. He loves them. He's walking around thinking we made good stuff. And now, I mean, in your period, we're looking, it seems to be Howard, and there's a Lima agreement, and these other agreements that have just seen us sort of slowly go down. Almost like a frog boiling point, frog boiling scenario. And now the frog is boiling because we owe $1 trillion. We're paying everything through the roof, and people are feeling powerless. And yet, here's where we are. And those who want to talk about it, like yourself, are demonized. You know, I can see in this thing now.
How did we get to a situation where we're $1.3 trillion in debt? And that's what we are, by the way, $1.3 trillion. If you add, in fact, it could be worse than that. Well, yeah, because you've got to add up the state's debt as well. And Victoria is 200 billion in debt. It's Victoria alone. In New South Wales, it's past 100 billion. I don't know where Queensland or West Australia is. But when everybody, see, people just look at the federal debt. But as the Australian population has to service the debt which government collectively has put us in. So add up all the state debt, add it to the federal debt, and that's what we're paying interest on. And it comes to some figure now like $70 billion a year is being sucked out of our economy. And that brings me to the theory of money. You know, that money which we borrowed, it was created out of thin air.
Yes,
we didn't have to borrow it. Gerard Rennick goes on about this. We could have printed that money in Australia and said, look, that money is backed by the $100 trillion of gold, lead, copper, iron ore, coal, lithium, that makes up this country. Uranium. That's worth more than paper, which is created by some European banker, because that's what they did. And now we're paying. See, they've made a mozza out of this. And I wouldn't be surprised if the people who organised this actually got a backhander as well. I know for sure that people got backhanders by organising contracts with Pfizer and Moderna and AstraZeneca for all of those shots. You go back and follow the money trail, you'll find that they were Liberal Party people who organised those contracts. The contracts are all business in confidence, so we're not allowed to see, and yet it was public money which bought it. We're not allowed to see those contracts. We're not allowed to see the commissions paid on those contracts. Those contracts collectively were worth about 1.3 billion, and it's likely that the commission was 30%. So these scumbags have walked away with $390 million, and they flicked a little bit of it to the Labor Party and a little bit of it to the Liberals and so forth. And that's why we've gotten ourselves into this mess. We're now building an mRNA factory here in Australia when all the data shows that mRNA is killing people hand over fist. No ifs, buts, or maybes. They're dead.
Apparently, Jared said the other day that they were shoving through 22 bills through Parliament, and one of them was to expand the definition of a vaccine, which of course means mRNA, because they want to get in everything. Can I ask you though, taking all your wisdom, everything you've been through, and let's pretend that our politicians aren't stupid. Let's pretend that they're not stupid at all. And because it's easy to just call them idiots and this, but if they're not stupid, then how did we get to here? I mean, was there one time where the political class just were purchased by the corporations just through even, I mean, I interviewed Ruddock and he said one of the problems is you have a politician in power and he's thinking, what am I going to do when I end politics, when I get out of politics? And Pfizer's sitting there going, hey, we got a $500,000, you know, we got a $500,000 job waiting for you. You don't have to do anything. But that is sort of a way, an incentive of going, but you just do what we say or something like that. But I don't know because I've never been in the political class. But how have we got here if these people aren't stupid?
One of the parts of Australians for Better, you know, basically reforming our Australian democracy is that we have a system of government where we select from a bunch of mates, people that we voted to represent us, and that bunch of mates goes across and tries to run or oversee the operations of billion-dollar government departments, something for which they are totally incapable of doing. I think that there is corruption. I believe that the Department of Health, particularly the secretary and the fellow who was running the TGA, Skerrick, they were either compromised, they were being forced to do something they did not want to do, or they are corrupt. because I had as a good friend Professor Tom Barodi. And Tom, by the way, he invented the cure for stomach ulcers, the Helicobacter pylori. He came up with
Oh,
a...
with Robin.
well, actually, Robin and, there were two
I
doctors.
know
I'm
Robin.
trying
I've
to
met
think.
Robin.
Well, yeah, and they would tell you they actually performed experiments on themselves to prove that Helicobacter pylori was in fact the cause of stomach ulcers. It was Tom who then came up with the cure. And
Yeah,
I
well,
think
I can
that
tell you the
Tom
other
might have been
side.
supervising them.
Robin had he's very incredibly tall man, very slim, very quiet, and he was working and doing autopsies and stuff like this, and he was finding it there. No one would believe him. No one took him seriously until Tom came along.
Yeah.
And Tom was the first one to listen, looked, and then he proved it, and now here we are. They both.
But
won
there were
Nobel
two. There were two doctors. Whether it was Warren and Mitchell or some name like that. There were two doctors who cooperated with each other, and bloody brilliant guys. But Tom came up
and
with
they won
this
the Nobel
concept.
Prize in the end.
Yes, that's right. Tom came up with this medication. Tom didn't get the Nobel Prize. The other two doctors did, and rightly so. What they did was amazing stuff.
What I found interesting, though, was he was a man that once he was proved what he could see was right, he won the Nobel Prize. But the entire health department just saw him as an idiot.
That's
not
right.
a game player.
Well,
so
Tom came up with a composite medication which consisted of doxycycline, zinc, and ivermectin for the early treatment of COVID-19. And the TGA, to this day, will not approve that medication. And yet doxycycline has been used for over 20 years. Zinc you can get across the counter. Ivermectin's been around since about 1982. So there is absolutely no reason on the basis of a danger to health why that triple compound could not be taken under medical supervision. And you have to ask, why is it that they wouldn't approve that? Why did they get rid of some 20 million doses of hydroxychloroquine that Clive Palmer bought?
I know.
They actually destroyed it.
That's an enormous crime. That's an enormous crime.
Yeah. And so, I can only point, the only thing I can think of, I can't believe they're that stupid. I can only point to corruption. Yeah, and I actually want to have a full hearing into this because I've lost members of my family. I want them to have to face justice.
Just before we go on, it can only be either it's incompetence or corruption, and because of the positions they've reached, it's hard to believe they're all that incompetent. So everything leans towards corruption. So who have you lost, Kevin?
Penny and Brendan Bailey. They're the parents of my son-in-law, Daniel. They both got the shot, and within a couple of days, they dropped dead with huge clots in their heart. And, using the Bradford Hill criteria, you have to conclude that it was the shots that killed them.
How old were they?
They were around 74 years of age, same as me.
Yeah, but they went at the same time. Yeah, I've heard. Yeah.
Now, my daughter-in-law, she actually, because I was very much an activist and outspoken about this whole thing, I became friends with Dr. Mark Hobart, who, by the way, is a beautiful man, terrific
he's a great
guy.
man. Yeah,
he is, and I think he's still suspended. This is a travesty of justice. It truly is. Yeah. It just drives me to tears. But I rang Mark and I said, look, Mark, my daughter-in-law has to get an injection. The New South Wales education system is insisting that she have an injection and she doesn't want to have it. And I've told her that, she's very wise not to. Can you help her? And so he then interviewed her for 3/4 of an hour. And at the end of it, he said, yes, definitely, she warrants an exemption. So he gave her an exemption. And the next day, the federal police called in and confiscated all of his computers and basically ransacked his office and closed him down. The New South Wales Education Department refused to accept my daughter-in-law's exemption. And as a consequence, because they were paying off a mortgage and all the rest of it, and she loves her work, she's just the most amazing teacher. she works weekends. That's where this business of, we ought to have a resources centre that creates the lesson plans, and there ought to be an examination centre that's assessing all the work, the assignments done by the students. That's where all of this grows from, because every weekend she's working. She works her guts out for her students. But anyway, she fronted up for this injection. Immediately afterwards, she got the most massive migraine and lost her sight in the left eye. So she's panicking like you wouldn't believe. This condition lasted for 3 months. Now, she went to the education department. They said, oh, well, look, next time for your second shot, go to the hospital, and if you have a reaction, they'll be able to treat you then. I'm thinking, hey, it could kill you. You could drop dead. You are definitely not a person who should have this vaccine. Mark Hobart had already assessed that, and it was genuine. Mark wasn't doing me a favour. He was doing me a favour in as much as he was going to listen to my daughter.
Not Mark.
No, absolutely dead straight.
I've interviewed him several times, met the man. He would not be, he just can't do it. And he just couldn't do it. I saw a meme the other day, and the meme said, it's a crime to mandate a vaccine where one of the known side effects is death.
Oh, yeah.
It's Russian.
They know it. Even the Pfizer data, I got hold of the Pfizer data very early in the piece, and I saw that 16% of the rats that they'd tried it on were rendered infertile. And so I said, well, look, on the basis of that, when you play with statistics, that means a married couple, there's a 24% chance that they won't be able to have children, because you only need one member of that coupling to be infertile. And what it comes down to is you take 16, divide it by 2, add the 8 to the 16, and that's 24. And that's how you come up with 24. Well, guess what? 24% fertility it's now, infertility is now on the stats. So they knew already that this was deadly stuff. You only had to read the data, and they went ahead with it.
Yeah, well, they've got that, the New Zealand Prime Minister, or the ex-Prime Minister, is in trouble for that now. He was the health minister, I think, and he was told the vaccine is not suitable for 18s, can give myocarditis, and he hid that information. And then he got told that the third one was really bad, and he still pushed that too. Now he's trying to talk his way out of it. But it does your head in. These things that we're talking, 24% infertility. I mean, what species, not race, what species does that to its children?
That's
Actively.
Right. Naomi Wolf's been on this. She's been really hot on it. Yeah. And I believe her. She's a very astute, intelligent lady. Yeah. And she's got no reason to lie.
But it's a disaster. I mean, it's like the crime of the century. You got 24% of young people can't have children. And I've interviewed other girls or parents of women who said, my daughter was 18, she took it, and now she has the eggs of a 39-year-old.
That's right.
Yeah.
Exactly right.
She's still fertile, but the eggs, and apparently boys' sperm full of spike protein, firing blanks. Yep. I mean, this is all from our own people.
It goes deeper than this, though, Michael. That Dr. Julian Fidge took a case to the federal court. Yeah. And have you interviewed him?
What I did with Julian Fidge, I have interviewed him a few times. He was the one that got ivermectin. Then he was another court case, but they said he didn't have standing.
That's right. That was Justice Rofe.
Who I met with Julian, he's a very capable man. He's a very driven man. But he had a great belief in vaccines, and the big pharma and what they were doing was correct. And so he was rigorous in making sure that his town was vaccinated and stuff like this. And I was talking to him in his office, and then he said he had young farmers coming in who had once been young, strapping men who were cripples with myocarditis. And I could see how it had damaged him. I don't see him as an evil man. I see him like so many of us. We couldn't conceive that our own people could do this to us. That's why I think they got away with it. Even now, I've heard people come up. I remember when we crossed the border and we got fined the first time we came. And now it's ironic. I don't think I can get back because of the fuel. But the first time we challenged the border, we got arrested. And a woman turned up at our gate, just desperate to meet us. And her husband was jabbed. She wasn't. And I remember him said, he was a really nice guy. And he said, why would the government do this to us? Why would they do this to us? That was the obstacle for him not seeing what was clearly evident, his innate trust that he believed these people. And that's what I think is what's holding people back. But the evidence now is overwhelming. You know, we're standing on all this mineral wealth and we're broke. It's the government's fault.
I wrote a letter which was co-signed by Professor Dr. Peter McCulloch, by Professor Dr. Dolores Cale, by Dr. Robert Brennan, and by Dr. Tess Loughrey, who's one of the world's best doctors when it comes to evidence-based medicine. This letter I sent by registered mail to the Prime Minister, Deputy Prime Minister, the Premiers, the Chief Health Officers at federal, state and territory level, and the police commissioners. 33 registered letters in all signed by these distinguished people and myself as the Secretary. We have never received a reply or an acknowledgement, yet those letters were delivered. Now, there's something very, very wrong, because they have an obligation to at least say, yeah, look, we got your letter, now bugger off. But not a single thing came back. And it was signed by some of that. Well, in the case of Dolores Cale, until she put her head up above the butts and said, listen, this is all wrong, she was lionized as being a woman who was eminent in science. She was one of the world's best microbiologists. And Peter McCulloch has written so many papers. There's so many cited papers by Peter McCulloch. He's a brilliant man and he's a beautiful person.
Yeah, he is. He's a lovely man.
I got a really big shock. When this first started, I wrote to him just simply saying, look, thanks for everything you're doing. I'm most grateful. And he wrote back to me. And so then we started corresponding. And he agreed to help me write that letter, which I did. Took me around 3 months to get it written. And we sent it on the 21st of October, 2021. It was by about May that I had deduced of 2021 that we really had to stop this. And then I started trying to find allies who would support me. And by October the 21st, I had that letter and sent it off. So we've got really serious problems. I then wrote to the Senate inquiry on excess deaths, and I put in a really comprehensive submission there, and they refused to publish it. They also refused to publish Dr. Melissa McCann's work and Peter McCulloch's work. And we've helped Melissa McCann with over 1,500 briefs of evidence for the vaccine injured. So, you know, it's terrible.
How do you deal with the frustration of, like here now, people are saying this is a great interview, they're loving listening to you, but say the Prime Minister listening to this, he'd sum it up in one word, oh, cookers, and that's it, dismiss us. That's what how do you deal with that frustration? When you have this knowledge, you see it, and you're just coming up against this brick wall of either corruption or ignorance or both. How do you maintain your passion?
There's a guy who runs community radio, Barry, somebody for some reason his name has slipped me. He's over on your side of
Barry Green.
Yeah. That's it.
From Duntroon.
And he says, look, we're winning this one conversation at a time.
We just chatting today. Yeah.
Yeah, no, lovely chat. Really good. And and he said, look, we're winning this conversation we're winning this one conversation at a time. And really that's the attitude I take. Look, I'm hopeful that people are waking up. Malcolm Roberts, by the way, was very supportive of me writing that letter and helped me in every way, even put me in touch with his lawyers and stuff like that. From the get-go, One Nation has been on our side. They're on our side with regard to the climate change scam as well. They have a whole lot of other very good ideas, like building dams to get water security, And also you can have hydroelectricity. We could channel water into the inland and greatly improve the flows of the Murray-Darling. There are all manner of...
Lake Isle up in WA.
That's right.
It's just sitting there,
Yep. And my hope is that One Nation will, in fact, be able to form a government in 2028. And if that should happen...
There's a very good chance. I think we're now... I think the government has betrayed us so much. I think it's like having a relationship where someone's either slept behind your back too many times or been a gambler too many times. At some point, the victim, the one who's been betrayed, goes, "No, enough, I'm out of here." And I think we'll look at that as an abusive relationship with Australia. Australians going, "We're over it. You've taxed us. It's corruption. We're broke. It's this. You're out of here." And that's what One Nation is seen as. There's no other cab on the rank except Rennick is coming up too. I'm a big fan of Rennick, a big fan of Antic, and I think there's more redeeming. I think there are leaders around, but the system is trying to push them down because they've got we're actually... 1984 is a brilliant novel, but another brilliant novel that George Orwell wrote was Animal Farm. And now where I see that, we're right now in the part where the pigs have taken over. And they're
the house. That's right. We get to live in the stables. Yeah.
Yeah, that was that. Yeah, that's right. That was that woman. She took $100,000 flight to see a friend, Amelia or someone. I don't know. Everyone's crazy about it now, but this was pure Animal Farm. This was a pig, going, "I'm allowed to do it," And the people at one point have had enough. We're seeing the death of the Liberal Party. I think the Labor Party could be next, but there's something else I want to ask you on a different, and this is because of your army training. And there's a few questions from the audience I want to ask you too. When we're in Canberra with the big march, the big rally, we're in the Epic. At one point, I was at the front gate. It was so exciting watching all these people come in. But then I was watching this huge load of people go out. I was like, where are you leaving? They go, "Oh, the army's coming. They're going to lock us down and arrest us." And I said to them, the army will never take up arms against the Australian people. But I had to admit, I didn't know. Inside of me, there was a thing going, "Please don't let the army raise up." I was literally, and they never did. And I asked some other people in the army, lower ranks, serving, just soldiers really, great guys, but because of where you reached, how close did we get from the Australian army actually getting involved of policing us or imprisoning us? Because one thing about COVID, but there was about 3 years, they built these camps. There was about 3 years where we had the distinct possibility that they would round anyone who hadn't taken the vaccine up. It didn't do it, but it was there. And our neighbors would have just looked through the window and gone, "Well, you should have got vaccinated," and closed the curtain on us as they took us away. So from your opinion, and I don't want you to get in trouble with your soldier mates, so you don't have to answer it, but what is your thoughts on that?
Look, I can only say that the people that I served with would never consider taking arms up against their fellow Australians. And in fact, we have a thing called aid to the civil power, and it actually, under the requirements of the aid to the civil power, it's necessary that both the Governor-General and the Governor of the state agree to the employment of the military to look after a national emergency. Now, where they will readily agree is in flood relief or bushfire relief, and that swells the chest of every serviceman. They love to go and help their fellow Australians. But I don't know of any serviceman who would willingly take up arms against their fellow Australians unless we're talking of an armed insurgency, something like the IRA, or something on that sort of level, where there's large-scale violence which can't be coped with by the police forces.
Yeah,
and I hope we never get to that point.
Around in Bondi that day, to be honest. Another thing going through, let's get to the Constitution. This is why we're going long today, because Kevin's incredible. I've had him on once before, but this is more prepared for this now. What are your issues and problems and changes that you'd like to see with our constitution?
The very first thing is that I'd like to have a situation where we elect our Governor-General and we allow the Governor-General to select the ministers of state from anywhere around the world. Now, interestingly, on page 706 of the annotated Constitution of the Commonwealth of Australia, which is a 1,050 page book, by the way, but on page 706, Samuel Griffiths and a number of other dignitaries, legal dignitaries, actually discussed that. And the indication was they were unhappy with what somebody slipped in, namely that the Governor-General can only select people who within 3 months will become members of Parliament. And these distinguished gentlemen disagreed with that. But the political class wanted the big chair. They weren't happy just to be the representatives of their constituents. They wanted to get over where all the jam was. And they get paid a lot of money to go over and be a minister of state, when they're in no way experientially or intellectually are they capable of comprehending the running of a government department. And that is why we need the Governor-General to be able to select anybody from around the world to be the head and the deputy head of the departments. The moment you do that, you no longer have the problem that we spoke of earlier, which is the team players are very good at dotting I's and crossing T's and passing paperwork, but they will never do anything that would upset their brethren. But if you bring in strangers who are adroit at running large organisations, like a hot knife through butter, they would sort the mess out and we would save a great deal of money. Now, I've already indicated to you that the figures are that in New South Wales alone, if we were to set up a centralised resource centre that created all of the course packages for all of the 95,000 teachers, and if we then made it possible for those 95,000 teachers to make input into the course packages so that they are constantly being refined and improved, you will save $1.3 billion a year straight up, just on that.
Elon Musk proved that with Twitter.
That's right.
I mean, Twitter had never made any money.
Exactly.
He got rid of 80% of the employees, and now Twitter has become the #1 news site around the world. I mean, the governments hate it, because people are speaking freely. And I remember another business guy, I'm not that great at business, but a business guy said to me, you get these big businesses and they can't change. They'll actually fail because they can't change because there's too many invested people in it. And so he said the only way to fix it is to bring in a CEO from somewhere else who has no allegiances. And they
bring in change agents and allow the CEO to bring his team in. That's very important also. Because if you've got it, and I've been in the situation in the Civil Aviation Authority where I was brought in as the branch manager for maintenance support branch. And if you don't have the ability to select all of the heads of the divisions that are working for you, then you're pushing it uphill because they will just passively resist you. So you've got definitely, and that's why I said the head and the deputy head of each department. You can't just take a head because there's no one that person can talk to. But the moment you've got two guys in there, you can, bounce ideas around and so forth and work out strategies as to how you're going to get from A to B. But anyway, so this was discussed before we developed the Commonwealth Constitution, and someone slipped it in that any person who is a Minister of State must, within 3 months, become an elected Member of Parliament. And that's where the trouble started before you go any further. And that's why we're in the mess we're in. You can't take incompetent and intellectually, ordinary people and put them in charge of government departments.
Who do you think is truly running Australia? Do you think it's the Prime Minister, or do you think now we had just been run by the hedge funds like BlackRock, Bill Gates, and these enormous multinational corporations?
It's the latter, no question of it. And they also control the media. And so, and the government is very responsive to the media because the media affects the electorate and their electoral chances. in reforming our Australian democracy, one of the things which I would like to see happen is that the electoral commissions, besides coming under an independent authority, which is in no way related to the government, I call it a constitutional assembly, but who, by the way, are elected people, but they would control all of the electoral commissions. The electoral commission should set up a website and aggressively advertise to the Australian public that this website exists, where you can go and learn about every person who is running for office in your electorate. And at the end of it, you can then go into a private virtual network where you create your own how to vote card. We should stop any people with electoral material being anywhere near a polling place. If people turn up and they don't know who they're voting for, they shouldn't then get a how to vote card thrust into their hand to affect them in the last couple of minutes. 20% of the voters are affected by that gaggle that sits outside the polling places. So it becomes a matter of whoever can assemble the biggest mob has the greatest chances of being elected. And that's not a recipe for getting the highest quality people into office. What we need is to create an environment where the election outcome is determined by mature voters, informed, casting a considered vote. And we can do that. If you reform our electoral system in the manner I've just outlined then, you go a long way towards it. Another strategy you use is that you use the Robson rotation. That's where the name appears on the ballot. The names are rotated on the ballot. So as you're handing out the ballots, each one presents the candidate in a different order. That gets rid of the donkey vote.
Yeah.
Right. Now, that was developed by a guy called Robson for the electorate of Bass. They actually have used this. If you ban all electoral material.
When they used it, did it show, was there any evidence that it worked?
I think it's still being used. And yes, evidently in a bad election, if you appear at the top of the list, it gives you a 3 to 5% advantage. And that could be the difference between winning and losing. If you're separated by 25 votes or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%.
And that means that, these people get in by chance. There should be no
senators in there who I just can't figure out how they got in there. So I can't believe they won the most votes. I just can't believe these people got in, and here we are with this. We have some great senators, but we have some others. Before we get to our audience questions, the other big thing going on at the moment is the two young men who have basically exposed, like the young guy did in Minnesota, the NDIS scams. And I'm saying, what is your view of the NDIS?
I used to give my time for free to the Intellectual Disability Foundation of St. George, and I actually went along to the various presentations before the NDIS was introduced. And it was generally agreed that this would be uncontrollable. It also, by the way, did damage to the Intellectual Disability Foundation of St. George. Before then, they had a very close relationship with the parents of the disabled children. Once NDIS came in, that became quite remote. And so it basically, all their work was gradually eroded. But the scheme is in dire need of a proper audit. And we should only be providing assistance to those children who are very badly affected. You've got all manner of rorts going on at this moment. And you've got businesses that are charging the NDIS something like $150 an hour and paying people $30 an hour to mow lawns and pocketing the rest. Yeah, there's huge rorts going on, and it's going to bankrupt this country. I mean, I think it runs at in excess of 40 billion now, greater than the defence fund.
$3.3. We are 1.3 trillion now.
Yes,
aren't we already bankrupt? I mean, aren't we just kidding ourselves to think we're not bankrupt? There's only 28 million people, 28 million of us. I mean,
well, I have an idea I'd like to float, if I may.
Sure.
And that is that we go to the people who have lent us this money and we say, here are vouchers for coal, iron ore, gold, lead, whatever. Here are the vouchers. And these vouchers at today's market price are worth this much. And so we're going to give you this voucher, and that comes off our loan. So we give them $1.3 trillion worth of vouchers at today's value. They've got those vouchers. Now, when the time comes they want to cash the vouchers, they come to a mining company here as an example. It's producing coal. And they say, here's a voucher for $300 million, 300 million tons of coal, because it's actually in tonnage. It's not dollars, right? So they can turn up 10 years hence, but it's still 300 million tons. And the Reserve Bank pays the mining company with Australian dollars. Now, you're not injecting more money into the economy, because these people, if they hadn't had those vouchers, they'd be giving you foreign capital, which would add to your economy. So in other words, it's a way that we are using our resources as payment. It's a barter, and that's how it works. Say, for instance, I was to do your fly screens for you, and you said, Kev, look, I don't have the money. You know, I'd love to be able to pay you, but I tell you what, I've got this, I've got this bicycle helmet back here, and it's worth da-da-da. Would you take that in payment? And I say, yeah, sure, Michael, I'll do that, and you take it, right? Well, it's the same deal. Money ought to be backed by something solid. That's what the gold standard is all about. But in this instance, we could back it with our resources or even primary produce. You know, you could say, look, here is 1 million tons of primary produce, say beef. And at present, the beef is, you know, that if we're selling in that market, beef is worth $25 a kilo on the hoof. And so that's what this is it. You discount our loan by that much, and you can come back in 10 years' time and you'll still get the same amount of beef, even if, because of inflation and so forth, it's now $100 a kilo. Yeah. You see how it works?
Yeah.
So we could, if we wanted to, we could get rid of these foreign bankers. And you asked about the Constitution. We need in our Constitution the requirement that the government cannot put us into debt without our approval. And we ought to do like the Germans do, where they say, look, you're not allowed to incur a deficit greater than 0.3% of the GDP. End of story. And if you want to do that, you have to come and get our permission, because you're putting us in debt. You're not putting yourselves in debt. You're putting all of us in debt. Same goes for treaties.
Ridiculous amount of, I think it's, I thought the world owes $300 trillion in debt or something.
Yeah. But, you know, we can pay all of ours back. 1.3 trillion is nothing if we were to turn around and say, look, here are vouchers for our raw material or primary produce at the present value, right? And you can bring this voucher anytime in the future, and we will give you these commodities. And the Reserve Bank will pay the supplier with Australian dollars. So we're not injecting more money into our economy, and therefore we're not going to cause inflation. You cause inflation when supply can't meet demand. That's when prices go up. The fact of the matter is wealth gets created every day. Banks actually generate credit every day for a worthwhile enterprise. That's a normal way that an economy works. Some people say, oh, look, if you print money, then the money becomes worth less. That's not true. You only get inflation when the demand exceeds supply. Then the prices will go up. And if demand is less than supply, you have deflation. People will sell off the goods just to get them off their shelf.
Yeah.
That's all. I mean, you've just got economy 101. And Jared Rennick has touched upon this. I actually said it to Jared, and he said, oh, Kev, you can't do that. The bond market wouldn't tolerate it. I say, well, bugger them. I'm very much in the mind of Alan Bond, where he said, if you owe the bank $1 million, you've got a problem. If you owe them $1 billion, the bank's got the problem. But we owe them 1.3 trillion.
That's right.
They got a big problem.
I saw a great comedian say, because England was owing $1 trillion, and he was like going, didn't they think once we reached $500 billion, didn't they go like, I'm not sure we're going to get this money back, and he's saying once they were $1 trillion, he's like laughing, going, trillion, what is $1 trillion? Forget it. You know, it's really interesting that way. I just want to go to some questions here in the audience, though, because
Yeah, sure.
Christine McKinley, she wants to know. We don't know, what is happening with Melissa McCann's class action. I should reach out actually and do a follow up.
I think that it's folded.
Yeah, that's
It
what I
went
thought.
to a hearing, and this judge made great fun of what they were trying to do, and was highly critical and basically canned it. And this brings me to Justice Rofe and Julian Fidge and what happened there as well. I believe that it is my opinion our judiciary is corrupt.
Well, we've seen a lot of evidence leaning towards that. We have.
Yeah, I mean, Melissa went with over 1,500 briefs of evidence showing that people had been vaccine injured.
Yeah.
Now, how could you chuck out a case like that?
No problem, Christine.
You couldn't. You couldn't. Not with any conscience, but they did. The same goes with Rolf. She said that Fidge had no standing. His family had been damaged. He was a doctor. He had results from 3 NATO-accredited laboratories showing that there's an unacceptable amount of GMO, genetically modified organisms, in these vaccines. And they're not vaccines, of course. I hate calling them that. But now he had all the evidence, and this woman would not hear the evidence.
Yeah.
And that's criminal. And then it went by writ of mandamus to the High Court once Deborah Mortimer, who was the Chief Justice of the Federal Court, refused to take any action. In reality, Rolf should never have heard the case because she had a past relationship with the defendant. And I believe, and I could be wrong on this, so I won't say it's absolutely the case, but I believe some members of her family still had some form of relationship, be it indirect or direct, with Pfizer. So she should have said, look, I can't hold this case. I can't look at it because there may be the perception of bias, and that you're never allowed to have the perception of bias as a High Court judge. So anyway, Mortimer refused to do anything about it, which speaks to Mortimer. And then a writ of mandamus was sent up to the High Court. And instead of the High Court doing as the High Court should have, it's supposed to be there to protect us. That's its whole raison d'etre. It should have said, Justice Rolfe, you have to recuse yourself. Justice Mortimer, assign another justice to hear this case, and you must not try to fall back on no standing because the claimant indubitably has standing. So let the evidence be heard. That's what should have happened. Now, the fact it didn't happen points to mass corruption. And the reason it's corrupt is that they are controlled by the government. The Attorney General, who oversees this whole pack, is a member of the legislature, a member of the cabinet, and therefore the core of the executive, and oversees the judiciary. The man's totally compromised. So that, our justice system, we are running despotism at this moment. That's the problem with the Westminster system of government. If you get an opportunity, and you must probably have already done this because you're a very aware person, have a look at Tommy Robinson's Silenced and see the travesties of justice that have happened to Stephen Yaxley Lennon. It's atrocious. He has been locked up in solitary confinement for most of the time for a period greater than 2 years. I don't know the exact figure. He's now free again. But never once did he go before a jury. Never once.
Well, we have the other young man in jail in Melbourne. He was a part of the neo-Nazi, or the neo-Nazi party, Joel. But as far as I know, he hasn't done a crime. He's in isolation. He hasn't been there for the birth of his child. These new immigrants get rape and stuff, or that young Vietnamese guy upskirting, just let off, and so we have political prisoners in Australia now.
That's right.
But you have, it's interesting if we see it from our point of view. Like, how's this happening? Because we love the country and we want our children to prosper, and we just want an Australia that lives up to the national anthem, really. And it doesn't make sense. But if you look at it you go, let's take out that filter and look at it that we want to destroy the culture. We want to change everything. We want to, there's some agenda which is anti-human and anti-Australian. Then unfortunately, everything they're doing makes perfect sense.
Yes, it does. It does.
That's the real tragedy. That's the thing where
Yep.
you wake up and go, it just doesn't make it. That's why it's so frustrating from our point, because if you were wanting to decimate the culture and you really had some other great plan ahead of you, of course you'd own the courts. There's no way with all your money and power, you'd leave an Achilles heel open like a fair judiciary. You just would not do it. I remember I have a great friend. His name is Danny. Now, Danny was working in the helicopters with Dr. Bruce Pay, who's another incredible guy. And he was the man who would jump out of the helicopter or go down the rope to save your life if you're in the water, if you're drowning or this. He's got some incredible stories of what he did. But he got king hit in a pub, I think it was in Perth, and it left him profoundly deaf. And then finally he got bionic ears. Now, when he got bionic ears, he thought, I'm just going to hear like normal again. But he didn't. It was like, it was all static. His brain had to look at a tree and he'd say the word tree and all he'd hear is, and he had to go, okay, that's tree. So he hears the world completely different now. He's relearned. He got his job back in the helicopters because he was so loved the job, right? And he wasn't allowed to go in the water, but he did the winch. He operated the winch. So that's where he was. Then COVID comes along and he doesn't want to take it. And he's just thrown out. Instead of celebrating this man as a true Australian hero, which is what he is, and he's working with Dr. Pay, so they're both heroes. Instead of celebrating the determination and the courage and the stubbornness, really, of this young man to help, and he just did it because he likes helping us. He wants to be the one that helps us. He's a great guy. He gets cast out. Anyway, he went to take it to the Fair Work Tribunal. And this is what happened. There was a guy going in there who'd been sacked because he couldn't make a helicopter pilot. He couldn't make the helicopter hover. Now, if you're in a rescue helicopter, I'm saying from the army, I'm guessing, I think that's probably an essential skill to make it hover. It's going to be very hard to hire everyone. You're going like this.
I'll tell you a little story about that in a while.
But he won his case. He won his case. Yep, you were discriminated against. Even though you can't actually do it. You got one job, you can't do it, but he still won his case. Danny was told by the Fair Work transmission guy, the Fair Work guy, he said, don't bother, mate. We've had over 500 people doing this, and we've just dismissed them all. It's written down. You don't stand a chance. And he was right. He lost thousands trying to get it. And now he does odd jobs here and there, a bit of NDIS. He's got 2 daughters, and he's a wasted resource. This man should be the man working where he's most needed, which is saving our lives. And it's like these, Dr. Hobart should be working because we need doctors. We went to, there's towns we've been to now, massive towns that don't have a doctor in the hospital. If you go to a hospital, you end up on a TV screen because there's no doctors. And how can we have this country, no hospitals and no doctors? And no one talks about it. It doesn't make sense. Anyway, where was I going with that? The thing is, this is what I've found. In the documentations that I've been doing, in the books and the interviews and stuff, I've been capturing the stories of giants. Dr. Hobart, Dr. Oosterhuis, Miley Trin, and not just doctors. All ordinary people, grandmothers here, young people here have stood up who've their dreams are crushed because they do not want to bend over constantly. They want to be their own citizens. A young girl, Amber, who's on the side of the bus, 21, who when I was in Streaky Bay, she came up and said, she'd never heard of us. She goes, I heard you capturing stories. I want to tell mine. Told me how she was working in WA, lost a job, kicked out of the share house because she wouldn't take it, crossed the border by herself, got to Adelaide, found a place to make a job, and was basically hiding out. And what she said to me, I said, what do you think's cooler, to be compliant or to be a freedom fighter? And she looks right in the camera and she goes, it's cooler to be a freedom fighter. And she spread so much hope. It got banned for ages. When we put it up, the bit where she said it didn't work. We had to re-put it up because This is the corruption. I mean, I don't know if Lisa's watching now, but our major Facebook page with 100,000 followers, we've still got, I think it's 2,996 4 days before we get it back because they just banned us. And it doesn't make sense if we're looking from a fair point of view, but turn it around and we're at war. There's a war against the Australian people happening now. And it's one of those wars, like Sun Tzu says, where the greatest war you can have is where the enemy doesn't know they're at war. And that's what I think we're facing. A lot of people don't realize, or they're just starting to realize, this is not accidental. This is manufactured. I mean, Dr. Bruce Pay was talking about a famine the other night, and so was Oosterhouse, and no doubt so are you. How could we possibly have a famine in this country? There's 28 million people. You've got the northern rivers where plants grow on rocks, so everything's growing. Tasmania, we are a food bowl that, all around Mildura and all this. There's no way we could be in a famine. It is manufactured. It is an attack. 2,000, there she is. Thanks, Lisa, you're a doll. She keeps our count. 2,000, we're going to have a massive party. When we get there, we'll all be in our 70s and go, hey, we can like funny cat videos again. But it's here's where we are. And I don't like to go on these extremist views, which sound crazy, but that's what all the evidence points to. There is a war upon our culture, a war upon the people. And whoever's doing it has scant regard for the welfare of our children or ourselves. And all we have, as I said this on the other night to Bruce, and made Bruce laugh, so I will repeat it. I said, people are trying to hold on to their pile of dirt, but that pile of dirt is becoming a pile of dirt. Now is the time. We have and this is why I love what you're doing. We have a moral obligation to speak out. If they're trying to silence us, then we do the opposite. We speak out. If they throw us in jail, so be it. We speak out. This is our country, and we're fighting not just for ourselves or our kids, but our grandkids, the Australians who haven't been born. I tell people sometimes if I'm doing this speech, if you ever get fatigued that you're not winning, close your eyes and listen to the ghosts of the Australians 3 generations away who are basically begging us to not let us be born into slavery. And we will be the enslavers if we do nothing. It might be orchestrated by those above us, but we are the ones that complied and let them get away with it. We will be the enslavers. And that's the legacy of our generation. We are either the liberators or the enslavers of the generations to come.
Yeah. No, I agree.
I wish you didn't. I wish you'd say you're full of shit, Mick. What are you talking about?
No, look, if you get an opportunity, you would, as I say, you're very switched on. But the viewers, if you get an opportunity, listen to Eric Butler's 1989 address. It's called "The Planned Surrender of Australia."
Wow.
Eric Butler, 1989. It's the most, I listened to this guy and I thought, oh God, I just wish I could speak like that fella did. It was just amazing. And it was amazing to watch his body language as well, because he was so clinical in his delivery, an excellent orator. But he belonged to the League of Rights.
Is it on YouTube? Can we find it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, go and I really recommend that you have a look at it. It is exactly everything you were talking about, Michael.
Well, there's 2 questions. One, what are your thoughts on us having, like the Americans have, with the rights?
Well, if we just drop a click, I've formed this Reforming Our Australian Democracy. Membership is free. I'm having a hard time getting it registered with the Australian Charities and Not-for-Profits Commission. I've now written to them a compelling case why they must register us. And, I am hopeful, therefore, that they will be convinced by the argument that I've put forward. Membership is free. My wish is to get 2 million members at least who will belong to this. Once you've read the presentation, there is nothing in that presentation that is offensive. And it is also apolitical in as much as it's not about any political party. It's about, if you love Australia, you want to be a part of this. because I then go through logically all the things that need to be changed in the way that we vote, the structure of our parliament, and what we need in our constitution. And it is totally open. All the members can have a say as well. But my vision is that if I could put together a petition of 2 million people demanding, for example, that we have citizens-initiated referenda, that we include in our constitution the right of free speech, that we include in our constitution that at all levels government may not appropriate your property without paying just compensation. What many people don't realise is that that is in the federal constitution, but the states can actually take your property off you. Also, people don't realise that the states, the politicians in the states, can change the state's constitution. You can't change the constitution of the Commonwealth of Australia except by referendum. So if you go and, you know, I'm being a bit long-winded, but that's how I see us affecting things. In other words, you submit to Parliament a petition of 2 million, and they must, by law, debate this on the floor. And what's more, they will come to realise that if they don't accede, they won't have a job around the next election, because we will make an issue of this. These politicians did not vote for what 2 million Australians wanted to have happen. I believe I could get more. There are 18 million people who vote in this country, and I believe that I could get somewhere in the order of 12 million people to actually sign petitions on certain articles. For example, most of your listeners would not know that Section 51, subsection 26 of the Commonwealth Constitution confers upon the federal government the right to make special laws on the basis of your racial makeup. Now, that shouldn't be in our Constitution, but it is. Wow. And we actually were fooled into agreeing for this. They held a referendum and there was no case presented to change Section 51, subsection 26, which originally said, with the exception of native Aborigines. Now, native Aborigines, according to Alfred Deakin in 1901, were people who were not half-castes. In other words, they were pure Aborigines. They hadn't intermarried. And all of our laws applied, that were in a way discriminatory, applied to native Aborigines, regardless of a person's genealogy. If you joined modern society, if you paid taxes and worked a job, regardless, you could vote. Most people don't realise that in the 1880s, Aborigines and Aboriginal women could vote in South Australia, which is really quite astounding when you think about it, that there was female suffrage in South Australia in the 1880s. And what's more, when we federated, one of the agreements, one of the not negotiable agreements, was that any rights that a member in the colonies had would not be surrendered on federation. So in other words, if you could vote before federation, you could vote after federation. Where we started to come unstuck was in 1918, we had the Electoral Act, and the last thing you should ever do is allow politicians to decide how you will conduct elections, because they will always organise it that it favours them, not what is best for our society. And that's indicative for the above and below the line voting, because when that was introduced in 1984, a fellow took it to the High Court and he was unsuccessful. But since 1984 to the present day, there has not been a truly independent person elected to the Senate. Yet the Senate is a house of review, and it does not and cannot serve that purpose if the same parties in the lower house are dominant in the upper house. Legislation will simply get a wave through, and that's what we have been experiencing. The Senate is not working as the Senate was intended, because 92% of Australians vote above the line, and the parties decide who will get elected. And that is contrary to Section 7 of our Constitution, where our Constitution mandates that electors are to vote directly for candidates. No one's allowed to interpose themselves between you and the candidate. But with above and below the line voting, that's exactly what we have. So we've got, this is why reforming our Australian democracy exists. Membership is free. I want to get millions of Australians to sign up. I want to put to them ideas. I want them to put to us ideas. And then we'll put a petition on Parliament. And if you've got a petition with 2 million people signing it saying, listen, we want Section 51, subsection 26 repealed, and we want in our Constitution that no government at any level within the Commonwealth or government funded agency may make laws or construct regulations that discriminate in any way on the basis of a citizen's race, sex, or ancestry. Put that into our Constitution, and most of the Marxist bullshit goes west. It can't. You've stomped out the major ways that Marxism tries to divide our society in exactly the manner you have been describing, Michael. You basically countered one of their major strategies, and that's and that's one of my things. I want that section gone because it's at present costing us in excess of $30 billion a year. And the money that we're spending is not getting to the people who need it. No, it's an industry.
Yeah.
And people ought to be paid welfare on the basis of their circumstances, not on the basis of their race. And that welfare should be means tested, which at present it's not.
No. So, yeah, I agree with you there. It's but look, we might just start just rounding this up. And I'll say this to a lot of people. There's a young woman said to me once, early on when I was doing speeches in Melbourne, that people with voices like us have a moral obligation not to sell hopelessness, no matter how tight its grip. Now, at the moment, the grip is pretty tight. So where do you, Kevin, see the hope going forward?
With reforming our Australian democracy. The core of our problem rests with a most effective system of government. Fix that, and then the government will fix the problems, which is the way it's supposed to work. We're not supposed to fix the problems. The government is supposed to set things up. And you come back to this, government's role is to facilitate and only as a last resort to regulate. Once you've got that happening, you're on the road to success because, like open source software, you're tapping the intellect of your population. You're harnessing it for good. So that's where I reckon we go.
I love it. Well, I thought you did a great thing of hope today, and it's something we've been missing. Adrian McRae said this to me, so I quote Adrian, but I've believed it for a long time now. We need a vision. I think the reason that a lot of people are going all of this is we don't actually have a destination. And if you have a destination, same in the army, we want to do this destination, all your thoughts and everything goes towards reaching that goal.
Yeah.
And what you said today about we could give young people property very cheaply. We could build these houses cheaply. I remember in Coburg, I lived in a house and it was a concrete house. And a guy came around and he said, councillor, I said, yeah. He was an old guy. He goes, yeah, we used to build these. We used to almost put them up in a couple of days. And, the house was still standing. I mean, it wasn't a mansion, but it was a house, had a great garden. Anyway, when you said that, what I saw is imagine instead of these young people, like I had a water meter reader guy, and he was talking to me here when he was checking the meter on this house we're staying in, Simon's house. And he said his wife wants a second child, but he has no way. He's trying to figure out how he can afford a house, and he can't. And he loved his job. He said, I love my job, but I just can't do it because I can't see how I can afford a house or what else I can do. And I'm thinking, imagining him, this hardworking Australian who doesn't want to be, is happy doing, and someone has to do that job, and he's happy to do it.
Yes.
But on that job, and he works 18 kilometers a day, 5 days a week, he's happy doing the job. He just wants to be with his family because the government made it that two people have to work. Apparently, families have lost 35%, 35 hours of time that they spend with each other. Kids and mum together. The mum has to work 35 hours a week is what your child is missing from you because we're all trying to, buy bricked up air. And so you've got all that going on. But imagine if we manage to achieve it, and you want to see a vision for Australia for the next generation, is that this man walks into a house that he's built, or that him and his wife have built. It's affordable. It's not going to break them. In 10, 15 years, they've paid it off, and they're walking in, and all they see when they see these extra bedrooms in this back garden is, let's have a family. Let's have a, and that's the vision for Australia, is that we allow a place where our young people can find each other, fall in love, and build families. And the government is all about getting the core of Australia, which is our children and families, and backs that. And that is how we move into the future. And that is a simple vision that I think most Australians would go, we want that for our kids. So how do we do it? Because we got all this space, we got all this technology, we got all this hunger to give this to our kids. So what's in our way? And if it's the government, well, the government can, you know, hit the highway. I won't swear. I think I've got through the whole show without swearing. But there's, it's funny though, you know, I meet grandmothers on the road. I do. And they go to me, I've never sworn in my life, but since these last 6 years, I just want to swear all the time. And so, you know, so we've reached that point. Kevin, it has been magnificent having you on. I loved having you on. Let's get you on again. I'm happy to help spread. I've put up your website here, so please go check out Kevin's website. There's another guy I'm going to send you. I'm going to connect you up. He might be watching. If you are, hi, Kevin. It's another Kevin. He's in New Zealand. He did the Cafe Locked Out website. He's a great guy, and he really wants to help. He's in New Zealand. So I think he could make a fabulous looking, more modern looking website, which might help you in your case.
Right.
So I'll link you up. He's an older guy too, but I think he's in his early 70s, but he loves it. He's just brilliant at what he does, and he's a tech head, and he'd help you with apps and all this sort of stuff. He's like a 15-year-old geek. He's just terrific at it. So I think you two would work well together. So after this, I'll do an email and link you up. And he's very, very cheap. Yeah.
We've got to build the website for road.org.au. We have a registered website, domain called road.org.au. And we've got to build a really schmick website for that. And so this chap would be very, you know, my website is there just to be, you know, it's utilitarian. It's not, it hasn't got any.
I still think you've got such a great voice that if people went from here to there and it was set up that they could, you know, basically go through and learn, we're willing to learn. Because I think the one thing, it's not that we're waking up, is that Australians realizing, we used to think it was like you said, the politicians should be fixing these problems, but that's not going to happen. They can't.
That's right.
It's up to us. This is our time. It's up to us. We just got to do it.
If I can just drive a nail home on parting.
Yeah, go ahead.
If we were to introduce that housing scheme, which you were alluding to, it would be possible to provide to young married couples a 3-bedroom high-set house on 800 square metres of land for under $300,000. And with a concessional loan at bond rate, the repayments on that would be less than what most young couples are presently paying in rent. Let that sink in. We can do this.
Can you imagine the country if we had lots more children running around now, families building?
And there's no cost to the taxpayer with such a scheme, by the way. It's all done at cost.
The feel of our culture. Yeah.
Yes.
We're worth fighting for.
I leave you with that thought.
I love it. Thank you, Kevin. We're going to go out with actually, because we've been talking about Australia, I think we'll go out with what we started with. And this is the lucky country. And I think we should wish us all the best. Kevin, I'll be in touch. I'll email that thing through you. Thanks for coming on, brother. It's been a brilliant interview, and I'm so glad I started early.
Thank you very much, Michael, for giving me this opportunity. I'm so grateful.
It's an honor. You're a gift to us, brother. You're a gift. And say hi to Stephen. I've been meaning to have him on. I think he's fantastic as well.
Yes, he is. He's a good bloke.
Take care. See you guys. This is the lucky country. Get ready for the What the F boys. I think they've got Kay coming on to talk about Desi. So that could be quite a controversial episode. See you later.
When I met Jesus Christ, he was almost 10 years old, and he was helping his mother push a trolley full of all they owned. And because they couldn't find an inn they could get in, they were heading to the city and leaving Bethlehem. Couldn't you perform a miracle? I'm out of them, he said. I tried turning nothing into warmth, but it just made my mother cry. It just made my mother cry. Mary Magdalene has become a man, and tonight he's old, and she has been riding my tram. Now it's late and she's trying to sleep beneath a poster for a bank. Your dreams are important to us as it bathes her face in gold. Come give us your natural gifts, we make wealth from toil. Come pretend for history's page that we're advancing Australia fair. Let's pretend that we're all advancing Australia fair. Back down the road I found the church we built on the black man's bones was empty, and out the front a sign read all but sold. A sign read all but sold. And we all owe so much money, but to whom we're not quite